This is the TSG Multimedia Podcast for July of 2020. We're sponsored this month by Soundtraxx and the TSG Train Crew on Patreon. Thank you very much. I'm your host, John Abaticola, coming to you from the TSG Multimedia Intergalactic Headquarters, as usual, and sheltering in place, also as usual. This month I have quite a bit to share with you, so buckle up and grab a drink and let's get started. The packed schedule of video conferences continued in June, as expected. This month we have a big interview, a special occasion, and a bunch of news and updates. But before we get to all that, let's go to George Bogatuk about this month's Soundtraxx Soundbite.
Hi, John. This month we want to talk a little bit about our Steam Tsunami 2. Now, in our Steam Tsunami 2, we have taken all the sounds that were in the original Tsunami, distributed over several different decoders, and combined them all into a single decoder. This way, when you're shopping for a Steam decoder, the only choice you have to make is the size or the board format of the decoder that you're going to choose. Now, with that choice included, we've also expanded the library considerably over what we did in the previous generation. So in our Tsunami 2 Steam 2 option, we have 90 different whistles to choose from, 54 bell recordings to choose from, 10 different exhaust chuffs, including light, medium, heavy, and geared options. We have 10 air compressors, 8 steam dynamos, different sounds for coupler, the type of injector, whether it's a lifting or a non-lifting injector, power reverse, manual Johnson bar, and we've also included options for the type of fuel that's being used. So if you're using a wood-burning locomotive, a hand-shoveled coal, auger-fed coal, or fed with a stoker, or oil burner using an atomizer, all of these sound choices are built in. Now, along with selecting the type of chuff cadence, including a conventional two-cylinder conventional rod locomotive with 4 chuffs per revolution. You've got a 3-cylinder with 3 cylinders and therefore giving you 6 chuffs per revolution, like you'll see in the UP 9000 series, also in a lot of Shays and things like that you can get those multiple chuffs. Also included in this is the articulated. In this, we have 4 different types of articulated locomotives. You have a conventional, just a traditional simple 4 chuffs or 8 chuffs per revolution, always perfectly in time. Now we've also got these going in and out of sync with each other at different rates, none, slow, medium, and fast. And so the chuff of the sound of those articulated locomotives, you'll see them going in and out of sync with each other, and that gives you different profiles as well. Now, once we take all of these different choices and we combine them and just check and see how many different profiles we can build using our Tsunami 2, we come up with 2.1 billion different combinations, and that's billion. And the reason this is so great is because I can take any of these locomotive profiles, change the whistle, and I've got a new profile. Now, when we look at our steam locomotives back in the day, steam locomotive whistles were not as standardized as diesels are today. And so with that, there were a lot of times that engineers had their own whistle and therefore would apply the whistle to the locomotive that they were running. There were a lot of times even the same class of locomotive were ordered at different times, and so therefore they were delivered with different whistles. Now, when we were designing the firmware for this decoder, we had current and former railroaders on staff, and still do today, so that way we can draw from their experience so that we know how these locomotives actually worked in real life. Therefore, anybody can make a noisemaker, but we take that extra level to make sure we understand how the sounds interact together to make sure that we give you a realistic experience of what it would be standing next to the real thing. Another way we've done this is we've got 16 independent sound channels, and what that means is that the decoder can play 16 different sounds all at the same time, so that way sounds aren't prioritized one over the other. For example, if your bell turns on, other important sounds like the air compressor don't mysteriously disappear. And the reason this is because, again, we're trying to give you the most realistic experience. Now, one of the other features we've got built in is a feature that we've got dating back to some of our early decoders called Dynamic Digital Exhaust, and this goes back to the early DSDs. And what this does is this reads the load on the motor and will adjust the sound and the intensity of that chuff based on what the locomotive is doing. So when you have a locomotive working harder uphill or pulling a heavier train, that sound's going to be much different than if it was running light or coasting downgrade with a train. So let's take a listen and let's run our locomotive. So first off, we've got our steam locomotive here, and we're just going to assume we've already done all the stuff necessary to get running. We've got our paperwork done, we've done our brake test, everything's ready to go. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to turn on the headlight, and you're going to listen to the dynamo, which is a steam-driven electric generator, turn on and spool up. Now, one of the other cool features we've added is a lighting effect called the dyno light, and what that does is it gradually intensifies as the dynamo spools up. So now once we have our locomotive, we're ready to go. We're going to blow our whistle signal, which is 2 long blasts in the forward direction. And that lets everybody know we're about to move in the forward direction. So we press the F1 to turn on our bell. And because we've been sitting a while, we're going to go ahead and turn on the F4 for the cylinder cocks. And this will blow out any condensed water out of the cylinder head to make sure that we don't damage the locomotive. Now we're going to increase our throttle to speed step 1, but you notice we're not moving yet because we have not released the brakes. So now with all that set, we're going to release the brakes. Now our locomotive is slowly going to start moving as we pull the slack out of the couplers on our train. And you'll hear those cylinder cocks cycle through. Now once we've got moving a little bit, we've blown out the water, we're going to turn off our cylinder cocks. And we're moving pretty good here, so we're going to go ahead and turn off the bell. Now let's say it's a wet day outside and we've got a lot of water on the rail. We're going to activate function 19, which is the sound of the wheels slipping off the rail. And you can hear that engineer back off the throttle and then reapply the throttle. So now we're going to go ahead and increase our throttle. And you're going to really hear that chuff intensify as it's working harder to get up to speed. So now you can really see how much more involved we can be when we're running our trains than simply running back and forth or just dialing the knob on a power pack and running. Now with all those different sounds, you can adjust how many or how few of those sounds play. Again, this is your model, it's up to you. Now one of the things, John, that we've talked about off record here is the discount codes that we have on our website to your greatest viewers on YouTube, and we do want to help them out. So we are going to go ahead and extend our TSG15, which is our 15% discount on our website at soundtraxx.com that you can use on purchases, including our great t-shirts that we've just got back into stock. Keep calm and play with trains. So thanks, John, again for another wonderful visit with you guys, and we hope to be able to be seeing you guys soon in person.
Thanks, George. After seeing the Tsunami 2s in action, it makes me want some steam in my HO scale collection. I got to document a Tsunami decoder going into a garden scale Shay a couple of years ago with my friends Kevin and Trevor, and it sounded amazing. You can see that video by clicking on the icon in the upper right part of the screen now if you're watching on a computer. I want to take a moment to thank Soundtraxx once again for helping support my work here on YouTube. It's appreciated much more than you know, and it's playing a really large part in some future improvements that I haven't really announced yet. Speaking of improvements, I have to tell you that the most recent episode of Model Railroading with Jack Burgess had a lot of ads on it. I've mentioned this in the past, that the only decision I can make about ads on the channel is to either turn them on or turn them off. I leave them on because I rely on the revenue that they generate to help keep the lights on around here. So that being said, watching some of the utter stupidity that people are paying Google to advertise on my channel here and having to see the same repetitive crap come on twice in some programs causes me a little bit of anxiety. I hate ads to begin with, so to see them disrupting the flow of a video that I've worked really hard on, it's really irritating to me. It just makes me all that more committed to turning all the ads off as soon as I can afford to do it. Just so you know. On June 17th, I had a talk with Eric Olds and Stathi Pappas about the Santa Cruz Portland Cement No. 2, also known as the Chiggen, moving to Folsom for future service on the Placerville and Sacramento Valley Railroad. So let's go to that now. Okay, so I have Stathi once again. You may remember him from last month. And I also have Eric dialed up here. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Chiggen going to the Placerville and Sacramento Valley Railroad, as promised. So, Eric, since you're kind of new to the channel here, I'd like to start with you. If you could kind of talk about who you are and how you're involved and that kind of thing so people know. So introduce yourself.
Sure, John. Thank you for this opportunity. So I've loved trains my whole life. My parents don't know when I started liking them. They say it's been ever since I was very young. And got involved with HO trains initially, working with my dad on a small layout in my bedroom. And eventually our interest turned to 7.5-inch gauge ride-on trains in a park. And that kind of comes into the story we'll share a little bit later. But got involved in that and then went off to college. And there was a branch line of the Southern Pacific Railroad, the Placerville branch, that was near my home while I was growing up. But I really didn't have any connection with it, saw a train on it once. But during my college years, I started paying attention to it because Southern Pacific had stopped operating it in the late 1980s and 1989. And I was following what was going on. It got purchased by a joint powers authority that included County of El Dorado, County of Sacramento, City of Folsom, and Light Rail. And they purchased it for public benefit, but the intent was to keep the rails for excursion service, possible future freight use, and do other things like build bike trails and whatnot alongside it. When I moved back to the area after a period of time in Colorado and time down in college, I checked in on that line and found out there was a group of individuals that were trying to preserve it with the intent of operating an excursion railroad. So I threw in with that organization, the Folsom, El Dorado, and Sacramento Historical Railroad Association. A big, long name for not a very large group of folks. But in that organization, we were preparing with equipment and opening up the line that had been inactive for a number of years. It was never legally abandoned, but it was inactive. And the Joint Powers Authority, after bringing light rail into Folsom, turned their attention to excursion rail. So we submitted a proposal, and along with another company that was actually a for-profit railroad, submitted a proposal, but they chose ours. They liked our proposal for excursion rail. We're an all-volunteer organization. And then, of course, the question became, can we actually make good on what we said we thought we could do and what we had dreamt of? And that was in 2008. So we incorporated the Placerville and Sacramento Valley Railroad at that time. And we started building for an excursion railroad. And I've been involved with that. So I started in 2004, my involvement, and have been working to that end ever since. Currently, I'm the Vice President and Chief of Railroad Operations at the Placerville and Sacramento Valley Railroad.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. So, Stathi, I know you were here last time, and I think that a lot of people who watch your channel know who you are, but if you could kind of give a little summary once again, because you're also involved because you own the locomotive that's going to the Placerville, or that's at the Placerville and Sacramento Valley Railroad.
Right, yeah. So I'm the owner of Santa Cruz Portland Cement 2, which is the steam locomotive that is on long-term loan lease to the organization. Bought that locomotive in 2006 and then rebuilt it with some compatriots starting in about 2009 through about 2013. I'm a professional in the heritage railroad industry. I'm currently assistant general manager of the Cumbres and Toltec Scenic Railroad in Colorado and New Mexico. We're a bi-state entity. I certainly love the industry. I love the history. I love the technology. I love the team building that goes along with it, and that's the reason why I have locomotives that I rebuild on the side, and sort of enjoy the opportunity for those engines to be the nucleus to create new steam programs in the future. When we started on Santa Cruz Portland Cement 2, I always imagined this locomotive is the perfect size and the perfect type of locomotive, that it could be the nucleus to sort of seed the world with a new steam program. And so I feel very fortunate that the locomotive is able to do that, and to go back to its home state of California, because that's when it was delivered in 1909 to Davenport, California. It worked there until 1924. Then it went to Oroville, California, and worked for Bechtel Kaiser Rock up until about the early 1960s. So it's always been a California engine. And this is sort of a returning to its roots and being able to help a great organization and share this technology with the world. So here we are.
Right. So talk a little bit, and either one of you guys could take this question. It's up to you how you want to do this, but just for the audience to talk a little bit about how it came to be, because you guys know each other from before, right? Maybe tell that story, because I know that you had a history with the Sacramento Live Steamers, and I think it's good to touch on the idea that the connections that you make in the community endure, and you never know what will come of those connections. Like in this case, your connection from the past ended up, in a way, leading to the Chiggen going to the Placerville and Sacramento Valley Railroad. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how you knew each other from before.
Well, yeah, both of us started out at the Sacramento Valley Live Steamers in Rancho Cordova, California. And at that time, in the mid to late 1980s, the club was very small, but it was very family oriented. And what was so great about going there, certainly when my parents started taking us and participating, there were lots of families there with children that were the age close, at least to what we were, and so it created a very good community vibe, and you got to meet a lot of people that were interested in railroad history, building of things, fabrication, machining, welding. It was a very fertile sort of ground to meet people that were doing some pretty incredible stuff. And so that was something that, as a kid was very, very cool to get to be a part of and meet people such as Eric as well. So with that as backdrop, let me turn it over to you, and we'll just tag team this kind of back and forth, I guess, right?
Sounds good. So yeah, when my dad and I joined, it was just because of a friend of ours through Soccer Connection that knew we liked trains and invited us over. And of course, as Stathi said, it was a great environment to learn and to grow and to just really spend time with people that were incredible craftsmen. And it was, men and women that were just had a passion for the community and wanted to have fun enjoying their hobby while also being a part of the Rancho Cordova community. For us, we would drive there and spend time on a weekend. And I'm a few years older than Stathi, and he was another boy running around there, and we knew each other. We didn't really hang out a ton, but we did know of each other, and we would see each other there. And that continued on until such time as I moved off. I moved away to go to college, and Stathi was still there, I believe, at that time, and coming up to spend time there. But when I left to go away to college, that's, like I mentioned, when I started really focusing on the Placerville and Sacramento Valley Railroad today, what it is, but actually at that time, just the Placerville branch of Southern Pacific. And my interest started to turn there. And at that time, Stathi and I weren't connected. We weren't being in touch or anything until 2009. I got on the internet, as I'm sure others of your audience do. Sometimes you just get on and you start looking for anything railroad, right? You need a railroad fix. And so you get on and you start looking for something that piques your interest. And I ran across a mention online of this guy who had purchased a locomotive that had been down near Stockton at a place called Pollardville. It was a billboard for a chicken restaurant. I'll let Stathi cover that a little bit. But I noticed his name, Stathi Pappas, and I thought, I know that guy. So I found a mutual connection that had a phone number for him, and I called him up out of the blue. I remember saying, I don't know if you remember me, but this is Eric Olds from Sacramento Valley Live Steamers. And Stathi immediately said, yeah, I remember you. And we just struck up a conversation. And that conversation went lots of different directions, but primarily we discussed what he was doing with the locomotive and his project. At that time, he was studying at the University of Nevada, Reno in a master's program there for industrial archaeology and anthropology. And I told him that, hey, do you know the Placerville branch? Of course he did. And I said, we're trying to get it resurrected as an excursion railroad. And we talked about how neat it is that in the preservation industry, you need people who are passionate about restoring equipment and getting it ready to operate, but you also need people that are passionate about the infrastructure that a train runs on. And so we were doing kind of those independently, but we thought, wow, wouldn't it be neat someday if we could put those two together and operate the Chiggen on the line? Do you have anything else to add to that, Stathi?
Yeah, I mean, and that was really early times because we were really just kind of beginning on the locomotive and figuring out just what terrible condition it actually was in and everything. But, having a dream, having a vision is what drives action, I think. And so, yeah, the opportunity for the locomotive to have a place to run, to be able to visit different places and be a traveling locomotive show, similar to like what the Gramblings did. All these things were interesting. And, not everything has completely come to fruition, but it's amazing how much of it actually has. And conversations like this provided the motivation to say, well, stay the course and let's rebuild this beat up old industrial locomotive. Because once it's ready to go, it will find a home. There are people that would love it and care for it, and it would do good. And because that's a typical sort of question that oftentimes people that are contemplating rebuilding a locomotive to service, they get asked, well, where's it going to run? What's it going to do? Is it worth doing it? And there's so much negativity out there. And, these friendships such as Eric's and mine, and the idea that, yeah, if we could pull off getting the engine running, we could probably find a place for it to go. And so that helped provide me with the courage to continue the project. And it was in terrible shape, but the fact that there was something at the finish line, that it wasn't just going to go back sitting in a field or be a billboard for a fried chicken restaurant again, that spurred motivation. And so here we all are.
Yeah, and admittedly, because of my interest, when I was at Sacramento Valley Live Steamers, I had the privilege of pulling the throttle on a live steam locomotive for the first time and feeling it pull away and operate under pressure. That was a pivotal moment in my life. It sealed the deal for me in terms of my love of steam as my primary interest. And so admittedly, even from the very beginning in my involvement with the Folsom, El Dorado, and Sacramento Historical Railroad Associations, I was dreaming of steam on this railroad and how amazing and wonderful it would be to have that. I wasn't alone. There were others. Of course, there were some who thought, oh, steam, that's just too big of an ask. It's going to cost too much money, so on and so forth. But it was a dream and something that I continued to hold on to. And as Stathi said, that conversation seemed to put it in just almost within grasp. It was like, wait a minute, this could actually possibly happen. And of course, in 2009, it's not like we made any commitments and we couldn't to each other or didn't know what was going to happen ultimately. But that started a conversation that we continued for about every, twice a year or so. We would email each other and back and forth, hey, how's it going? Stathi would ask me how it was going out on our branch line, and I would ask him how the locomotive's going. And then just before he got to the point where he was ready to fire it for the first time, we kind of lost connection for a bit. And I ran across something, again, mentioning that he was just about to fire it for the first time. And so we reconnected at that point. That was in 2013. And it was really exciting when he did get it up and running. I continued to follow that more closely and found out he was going to bring it to California. Do you want to mention about that, Stathi, when you first brought it to California and what that looked like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, talk about sort of a confluence of interests and desires to do something kind of cool in 2014. The Niles Canyon folks were organizing their third Steam Fest, and they invited SCPC2 to participate. And so, what a wonderful opportunity to bring it back to California and be able to operate on another former Southern Pacific Railroad. And great folks at Niles Canyon. And as part of the Steamfest whole deal, they brought another visiting engine, which was the Mason County 7 from the roots of Motive Power. And then, of course, they had their 3 locomotives, the Malley and the 2 262s of theirs. And so a 5-engine show for 9 days. What a wonderful opportunity. And they paid for everything to bring it down and be part of it. What a great event. Can't say enough great things about it. And then associated with that, so Santa Cruz Portland Cement 2 worked at the cement plant in Davenport, just north of Santa Cruz, and ran a road haul about 6 miles into the hills to their quarry near Bonnie Doon, California. Well, I had worked at Roaring Camp in 2008 and had a lot of friends and colleagues there still. And so they were interested in hosting the steam locomotive to come and run on their standard gauge railroad down to the boardwalk. And they even were able to get permission to run on what was then Iowa Pacific, north out of Santa Cruz, back towards Davenport. Now, unfortunately, the track wasn't in service all the way up there. But basically, we were able to bring the Chiggen a month after the Steam Fest down to Santa Cruz, her home city, for the first time since 1924, and run her darn near to home rails again. So what a magical story that was, and being able to reconnect with friends and colleagues there. The whole Chiggen story has really been sort of a Cinderella story in a lot of ways. There are a lot of things that you imagine in life that, wouldn't it be great if this happened? And what's been so rewarding about all this is it's almost as if you dream it, it probably could happen. And, I remember back in the Live Steam Club days, for instance, we had a guy that was a mover and shaker in the club at Sacramento Valley Live Steamers. Mylan Thorley was his name. He lived in Shingle Springs, and he had several events where he'd bring the young people from the club up to his property. He had a 12-inch gauge railroad. He had a model railroad and an SP caboose, and he was trying to foster, us young people to see a lifelong interest in this, not just, well, we like trains as kids, but what could it be, what could it grow into for you? And he really tried to foster that. Mylan was great at that sort of thing. And I remember when we'd go up to his place and he'd have these parties basically to encourage, youth in the hobby and whatnot. We'd always drive past the Placerville branch because it was all right there. And I always said to myself, man, it would be really cool if trains could run on that again. And again, it's that Cinderella story. Mylan did right by all of us young people in the club back then, because so many of us have translated this into a lifelong passion to do things that matter and share it with the world. And I think that, this is in memory of him. He passed away probably about 15 years ago now. But, in many ways, this is a tribute to his vision to invest in young people as well. And here we are.
I think that's a really cool way to bring that around. I didn't even realize how deep the connection to the Placerville and Sacramento Valley Railroad went for you, Stathi, specifically. Because I know we've talked in the past, we both grew up around close to Stockton or in Stockton, and that's where I knew the Chiggen from also, because Chicken Kitchen right there off 99, I saw it there all the time too. So it's kind of cool. I mean, it's funny. We kind of all grew up in very close to the same area. That I'm surprised that we didn't somehow run into each other back then. But
we probably did. We just didn't know it.
Right. We didn't know who you. I didn't know who you were. Yeah.
Wouldn't have known if we had, probably. And it's you brought up the human connection in the hobby and the community, which of course Stathi's been talking significantly about, and we're discussing here. For me, when I found out that he was bringing the Chiggen to California, I was very excited because at that time it was up in Washington, and so I thought, wow, this is awesome. I'm going to actually get to see it. I chose to buy some tickets with my parents to ride in Santa Cruz because I'd never been on the Santa Cruz Big Trees and Pacific Railroad. So I thought I can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And it was a really neat moment when I first saw the Chiggen pulling up with its train in preparation. I was actually, my parents and I, we were on, I believe Stathi told me, the first train that day that headed out. And that was the first time I'd seen Stathi since we were kids. And I walked up, and it was just a great opportunity. And there were others there from Sacramento Valley Live Steamers that were all part of Team Chiggen, the folks that helped put the locomotive together and supported Stathi in this endeavor and helped him make the dream a reality. And they were there helping operate the locomotive. And so we took a photo of all of us from Sacramento Valley Live Steamers, including my dad in that photo. That was a really special moment for me. And then I boarded the train, and we had a wonderful trip. In fact, mid-trip, my mom looks at me, and she said, that this grin on my face, she said, it looked like I died and gone to heaven. And as I've thought about that statement, and in that moment, I told her, I said, you know, what I'm enjoying is we have a gentleman, and that's you, Stathi, who had a passion and a desire and a dream, a personal one, but you invited others into it. And in so doing, you blessed a whole lot of people who were part of that Team Chiggen, who made that happen. You brought joy into their lives through following your own dream and passion. And again, against some of those naysayers, those people that said, oh, that's, you know, a piece of junk. It's just going to be yard art. And what are you wasting your time with, right? But you pursued it, and you had a community together. And then when you were operating it, I noticed all the passengers, there's all these people, young and old, myself included, that were enjoying just this magical moment as we're rolling down the line. And then in addition, as we rolled past houses in Santa Cruz, of course, there's like street running there, I was totally blown away by that. We're running down the neighborhood streets, and people are out in their front yards with their cameras taking pictures, and kids are running out, you know, from their inside the houses. And I just saw all the joy that came from you pursuing your passion and your dream, and how you were able to bring joy to other people. And for me, that's why I had such a big smile on my face, because I know as I pursue my passion of my love for railroads, I don't know why God made me that way, but I love railroads. And if I pursue that and it can bring joy to others, that to me is multiplying the experience and the blessing in it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And yeah, we do all of this so that people, I mean, you know, kind of personalizing it a little bit. You know, I remember, you know, being a kid, you know, my parents taking me to various tourist railroads and whatnot. In the early 1980s, there were a lot of places that were having problems running their steam engines. And it seemed like there was about 6 years there every time we went somewhere and we were going to ride behind a steam locomotive. It wasn't running because it was broken. And I think that really sort of spurred my development as an adult, because, you know, it's like the mission is make steam engines go and make sure that you can share it with people so that those kids get their steam experience, you know. And so at one level, it was really bad, you know, for a 4-year-old. I was disappointed a lot. But, you know, at the end of the day, I hope that it does good for people that are interested in it. And it certainly gives me a lot of value in my life to be able to say that I can help make a difference. So
I'd like to try to fast forward just a little bit to present day. So now the Chiggen just came down from where it was in Washington, right, Stathi?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
and it made the trip down to Folsom in, what was it, May?
Correct. Yeah, it was mid-May that we made the move. I believe we loaded it on the 13th, I think it was.
Yep.
Okay. And so now it's in Folsom now, and you guys have erected what we're calling the Chiggen coop, which is a metal building there to house it. I'm kind of curious about the logistics. You know, like, for example, how long do you expect it to be before it actually sees action? I'm really curious about the logistics of how the Placerville and Sacramento Valley Railroad will deal with things like, you know, how the water is going to be brought in. I would assume it's going to be a truck, but I don't know that. So, and, you know, that kind of thing. What about maintenance? How are you guys going to deal with all that stuff?
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to start off, and I let Stathi share some details about a few things there. we are very excited. Obviously, getting it here was a significant logistical arrangement. Working with Stathi for months, really, in preparation, and as it got closer and closer, daily phone calls, talking about details and sorting out things. One of the, again, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but one of the pleasures in that was it really felt like a partnership. We were working together because it was a partnership. This wasn't just one of us trying to push an agenda or make something happen. We were both very much eager and interested in making sure that this happened successfully, and that it happened in a way that was beneficial to both of us, our organization, as well as Stathi as the owner of the locomotive. And then, of course, with the dream that we can bring it to a community of people down here in Folsom, and of course the broader Sacramento area, and of course folks that want to come from far and wide. We invite you to join us to experience what's up ahead. So getting it here was a bit of work, and we're happy to have done that successfully and safely. And that was a great testament to all the teamwork with Team Chiggen, the folks that came out of the woodwork, traveled from near and far to assist in that process. And we were able to do that. While it's here, we were able to secure it in the new structure, the Chiggen Coop, which we obviously had to get installed before it got here. And with COVID hitting in that process, it created quite a challenge for us. But we were able to finish that and get it done about, trying to think, I think we got it installed about a week and a half, 2 weeks before we brought the locomotive down, somewhere in there. And very proud of that, being able to make that happen. And now, we're doing some finishing touches on the interior of that building, getting it ready to be a hospitable place to service the locomotive. But basically, the way we've made this arrangement with this lease agreement and our conversations, Stathi is very much interested, as he shared, of having that locomotive become a seed for the development of a program for STEAM. And we have some individuals that have some experience with STEAM that are either part of our organization or connected with us. But for the most part, we're a clean slate. And it's a wonderful opportunity for us to learn from Stathi, from someone who has the type of experience that he has and the knowledge and the intimate understanding of his locomotive. I mean, he's torn that thing apart to the very bones and then brought it back together and put it back together. So he knows it very well, and he can teach us how to take care of it properly. And his word is going to be final. We've agreed that he's our expert, and he's the one that's going to advise us and guide us. And then he's going to be teaching us, and we'll be bringing others in that will help us with that process. But one of the nice things about the locomotive, John, I know I mentioned this to you last week, is while it's a small locomotive, it's a very capable locomotive. And I know that from watching it perform in Santa Cruz. And honestly, while we were doing this move, I got to hear lots of stories from Team Chiggen about how incredibly capable it is. So it's small, which means it's not going to cost a lot to maintain and operate it. It's going to be very manageable for us to learn on, but it's also capable, which means it'll be able to pull anything we're going to conceivably put behind it in the time period that we've made this agreement for. And so that's a real win-win situation for us. And Stathi, what I'd like maybe you to share a bit about is what you've already told me in terms of when Porter designed this locomotive, they had in mind a very unique circumstance for it to be maintained in, and how that's going to be a benefit to us.
Right. Yeah, that's a good segue. So obviously most people know about builders like Baldwin or Alco or Lima. Porter was an industrial locomotive builder. And so their locomotives were, for the most part, smaller. I don't think they made anything over about 90 tons ever. And their locomotives were intended to be less expensive, but they were also intended to be able to be maintained in less established conditions. If you think about mainline railroads in the late 19th and early 20th century, I mean, they had back shops with overhead cranes and drop tables to remove drivers from underneath locomotives. You could pick a whole locomotive, up by the boiler, lift it and its frame off its running gear, and do total rebuilds on things. The big railroads were committed with the infrastructure to maintaining their locomotives in every way possible. So they became bigger, they became heavier, they became less easy to deal with in field conditions because they had the infrastructure to be able to work on them not in field conditions. Engines that Porter built, H.K. Porter, they were intended to go out to operations that were maybe very isolated from large cities or metropolitan areas at the ends of supply chains oftentimes. And so as such, you designed a product that would be rugged and would do the job, but you also wanted to make sure that accessibility within the machine, the size of the components that you were dealing with, were something that basically two guys could pick up and put back on an engine. And so if you look at everything about Santa Cruz Portland Cement 2, other than de-wheeling the locomotive, basically two guys can do almost anything you need to do on it. You could remove any component other than take an axle out from underneath it. And being as that it's an 040, the way the frame is designed, you can jack up one end of it and roll one driver out from under it at a time if you had to. And that's actually what I ended up doing with it when we de-wheeled it. Was we lifted up one end with a forklift, rolled the one driver out, set it on blocking, lifted up the other end, rolled the other driver out, and then we turned the drivers and did the axle box work, choosing wedges, etc. So the design of it is incredibly conducive to field conditions. And as such, it makes it a very good choice for an operation like this. Everybody would love to have a 125-ton 280. Wouldn't that be great with 63-inch drivers and until you have to start taking it apart and maintaining it. And I'll tell you, even from our perspective at Coombers and Toltec, right? So we have our K36 class locomotives, which are about 94 tons, but they still have 44-inch drivers, and you could hang a main rod with 2 or 3 people. And even though the Denver and Rio Grande, it was 3-foot gauge, but it was still a main line, but they conceived of things in terms of sizes that made sense for human level work. You didn't have to completely mechanize everything. And so for us, the K36 class is perfect for a lot of the same reasons that the Chiggen is perfect for a smaller operation in the heritage railroading game. So choosing appropriate motive power for your operation is kind of critical. Everybody loves 484s. Trust me, I do too. I'm really glad I don't own one.
That's awesome. And John, I know you asked the question about some of the logistics with how would we supply it, those sorts of things, operating on the line. Obviously, any steam era support infrastructure that was on the railroad, the Placerville branch, is long gone. However, we will be starting with some creativity to make it happen so that we can operate before we're able to fully develop even our own infrastructure that will be more of a more permanent nature on our line. And to that end, one of the aspects you brought up was water, and that's going to be important. So months ago, I started a conversation with the city of Folsom. I actually work for a water agency, not in Folsom. And I know that we have what are called hydrant meters, and we use those meters to provide water for construction projects, those sorts of things. So I started a conversation with the city of Folsom, their water department, and discussed about the possibility that we might be able to obtain a hydrant meter, and we could pull water off of a municipal fire hydrant that's near the railroad tracks in order to supply the locomotive. Obviously, another option could be a truck that could bring water in, but there are solutions to these things, and that's where the creativity comes in. And we're used to trying to be creative to come up with solutions to those types of challenges. And fortunately, Stathi, he has experience as well as other organizations in the area. We've already received input from the California State Railroad Museum. They've shared some of their expertise and experience with steam and what they have found in terms of supplies for lubricants and water treatments and those sorts of things. And Stathi has a host of experience with that, and he's putting that together in a manual for us. So we'll be bringing all of that together so that we can make those decisions to put things in place. I know the kind of, $50,000 question. That used to be a lot of money. I don't know if that is today, but the big question is, when are we going to operate? We would love to be able to operate this year. We're hoping to have an opportunity to bring the Chiggen out this year. There's work to be done in terms of connecting with Stathi with doing an annual inspection for FRA on it, as well as preparing it to make sure it's ready to operate, getting all those logistics I just spoke of. But we also have the added challenge that this year with COVID, we're not up and running yet. We're not at the moment allowed to operate, and we have significant deferred maintenance in terms of track work and equipment that we are working on now as we're able to slowly start adding more volunteer work, given the loosening of some of the requirements in our community. But that work was deferred. It would have been done already had we not had the COVID situation. And we've got equipment that we're also working on to do maintenance and preparation of operating. So all of those things have to come together. So we do hope to bring it out this year. We're going to do everything we possibly can to make that happen. And we look forward to being able to make the announcement that we're firing up the Chiggen and it's going to operate for the public. And, if for some reason that doesn't happen this year, I can tell you we're committed to making it happen as soon as possible.
Okay, fair enough.
If I can jump in for a second, when we first started having these conversations, one of the tenets that we sort of agreed upon with all of this was stewardship of the artifact, of the piece of equipment, and the railroad in general, and then sustainability. And so stewardship, making sure that you're not giving up ground on what you're doing, whether it's for the steam locomotive, whether it's for the railroad, for the other equipment that they have, but then sustainability as well, in that you can keep on doing what you're doing without stopping. You don't run out of money, you don't run out of manpower, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the critical tenets that we were all in agreement, right at the beginning when we first started talking about whatever happens, it needs to be sustainable. And leave emotion out of this. Everybody would love to be blowing the whistle tomorrow, right? That'd be great. But the thing is if there isn't a good business plan behind it, if it's not going to support the ongoing success of the organization, then it's of no value at all to do it that way. It takes a better plan. And the romance will get you so far. Good planning and operationalization is what makes it last. And so I have to say, a tip of the hat to you guys for not getting the cart before the horse. The locomotive, short of an annual inspection, is ready to go. It'll take care of what needs to happen when everything is in place to do it right and do it well. And there's no reason to rush that process at this time. So.
Yeah, for my part, it's more of a curiosity, because I know that there are people watching who want to know, when is it going to run? I want to come, ride behind the Chiggen. So it's really an ask for them. I agree and understand exactly what you're talking about. You have to do things right and have a plan. Makes a lot of sense to me. And it's true of anything that's worth doing. So.
Right, and this is worth doing, and yeah, COVID-19 certainly for our entire industry has thrown a monkey wrench in all of these heritage railroads and railroad museums. I mean, I can't stress it enough. Wherever you are, wherever you're listening, if you can't come to Folsom and help these guys, or you can't come to Colorado or New Mexico and help the Cumbres and Toltec, whoever is near you, go and help them. Give a donation when they are operating. Ride their train or pay an admission price. Buy something at the bookstore. This is going to be a tough year in the entire industry, and if you want to see your local heritage railroad institution survive, it will take your support. So, go out there and buy or donate often and frequently.
I want to jump in here, if I can, because I think that's a good segue to sort of wrap things here, because I wanted to find, I know the answer to the question, but I want to give you both a chance to plug both of the organizations. And I know, don't you have a page for the Chiggen too, Stathi? I mean, why don't you guys plug your web pages? Because I know that the Placerville and Sacramento Valley Railroad also is looking actively seeking donations and help too. So maybe Eric, you go first with the Placerville and Sacramento Valley stuff, and we'll go to Stathi and wrap it.
That sounds great. I do appreciate this, John. This has just been a real pleasure and opportunity to connect with Stathi and you. And the Placerville and Sacramento Valley Railroad, you can find us on the web at psvrr.org. That's P as in Paul, S as in Sam, V as in Victor, and then rr.org. And you can find out all about us there. In addition, I direct you towards our Facebook page, because that's where you're going to see kind of more dynamic information about what's going on, activities that we're involved in, and what we're doing. One really important thing to note about our organization is we are an all-volunteer nonprofit 501c3. Donations are tax deductible, and we're always looking not just for monetary support, but also volunteer support. We've got folks that join us, so we've got folks that have to move on in their life, or they get to a point where they can't physically do things. And so we're always looking for more volunteers to help us out. We have a grand vision. We want to run trains from Folsom all the way to Shingle Springs in El Dorado County, connecting with the El Dorado Western, and in so doing, make the entire old Placerville branch operable and available to the public. And so that's a big vision, and we can only accomplish that with more folks coming alongside. We are standing on the shoulders of those that have gone before us. The interest in preserving this line started in the 1990s, and we've built upon that early work of others, and we want to continue that work with generations to come. So I do invite you to support us and be a part of what we're doing.
All right, and then I guess I'll go. So yeah, if you are interested in checking out the webpage for the Santa Cruz Portland Cement 2, it is SCPC2, the number 2.com. You can also check us out on Facebook, Santa Cruz Portland Cement numeral 2. And also personal company, Stockton Locomotive Works, also on Facebook, where you can check out the work. That's my personal shop. We're working actually on White Pass and Yukon number 61, which is a 1900 built outside frame 280. I had so much fun doing the Chiggen with my friends, I decided I needed another one. So now we're doing the River Monster straight out of the Skagway River. And you can check out our progress there as well. Also, for my home institution, the Cumbres and Toltec Scenic Railroad, it's cumbrestoltec.com or the Cumbres and Toltec Scenic Railroad on Facebook. Check us out. Come out, take a ride on the highest steam railroad in this continent, going over Cumbres Pass, over 10,000 feet. And we are operating this year even in the land of COVID. We have taken our safety programs and protocols very seriously, and so we are here to provide a train ride to anybody that comes to our area. So come see the beautiful Rocky Mountains from narrow gauge steam if you have the opportunity.
Okay, hey guys, thanks so much. I think this is a really great story, and I'm looking forward to coming out to Folsom and finishing the video that I started 2 or 3 years ago. Before I found out that Steam was coming. I want to thank you both so much for joining me, and I'm sure that our viewers also really enjoyed hearing from you. Thanks so much, guys.
Hey, thank you for what you do as well, and making sure that the word gets out there. We really appreciate it.
It's all about sharing. It's about sharing the joy, right?
That's right.
Amen.
All right.
That's right. Amen.
Okay.
All right. Take care, guys.
And back to me in the studio. So there you have it. Like I said on the call, I think this is an awesome story, and it just goes to show that the people you meet and the things you do can lead to very positive and unexpected events later. So it's a really good idea not to ignore the social aspects of the hobbies you're involved with. You never know what they'll lead to. I hosted a video conference for the TSG Train Crew on June 20th. About 20 or so of us got together in a private video conference with Jack Burgess. Jack talked about his lifelong journey in model railroading and provided a lot of insights about how he decided what to model, how to model it, and why. It was kind of like an episode of Model Railroading with Jack Burgess, but the difference was that people got to ask questions in real time. I recorded the whole thing, and it might end up on the channel sometime later this year, but I wanted to mention it because this kind of private event is something that I'm looking at doing every month for TSG Train Crew members, and they're not likely to all be recorded for the channel. And in case you didn't know, I refer to Patreon supporters as the TSG Train Crew. Train Crew members get behind-the-scenes access and opportunities to help me decide on what kind of content to produce, and quite a bit more. They're also invited to private meetings like the one that I just mentioned. So if that sounds like something you would enjoy, check it out when you have a minute. You can find out more by going to patreon.com/TSG Multimedia. The following day, we went live from the studio here with our 4th episode of TSG Live Shelter in Place. In this episode, I shared my entire N-scale collection with the best viewers on YouTube, and when the sharing was all done, we ended up just kind of hanging out for about another hour. This episode broke our previous record by going for over 3 hours. It also made me realize that I really want to do more programs like that. The reason why is because during the show, there was a lot of interaction in the live chat window, the text chat. And by hosting a live show with a text chat window like that, it gives people a place to socialize while we're all cooped up at home. I'm already planning another live stream for July, but you can bet that I'll be thinking of some way to try and incorporate at least 2 live streams a month into the schedule. I mean, at least until the pandemic is over. On Monday the 22nd, we went to Roaring Camp. Something pretty cool was happening there that I didn't want to miss. And the funny thing is, it didn't even involve trains in motion. So let's take a look at that now.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Shreve. I'm Senior Locomotive Engineer here at Roaring Camp. I've been working on these engines for the last 47 years. My partner here is Phil Reeder.
Hi, I'm Phil Reeder. I've been associated with Roaring Camp for a long time, not as long as Tom, but I've been here 30-some years. Practically grew up here like many of the young fellas did.
Well, what we're here for today, we put the builder's plate back on the Dixiana. Builder's plates were cast by a foundry, and they were put on the engines so that the engines could have a little bit of history behind them. So that if you were, say, ordering a part for a locomotive from the original factory, you had a number to go along with the locomotive, so that they had a file in the original factory that they could go back to, find what the part was, and remanufacture it.
The Dixie has been without a number plate, builder's plate, for about 60 years as far as I could tell. We have photographs of it in Virginia before it came here, having the plate on it. But by the time it was loaded on a flat car and shipped to Felton, by the time it arrived here, there was no plate. So for the entire time it's worked here at Roaring Camp, it's never had that builder's plate. That's always bothered me, ever since I was a kid. Going back though now, several years ago, I was riding a train with Georgiana Clark, the CEO and wife of the founder, Norman Clark. And I told her, I says, I'm going to have plates made for these engines. I says, it's going to be on my nickel. It's something I want to do. And she was good with it. I said, okay, sounds good. And we went on to talk about other things like the Climax Project and things like that. Well, I started doing the research on who could build me a pattern and who could do the foundry work. I actually found several people who could, but circumstances being what they were, unfortunately, they all flaked on me. So it took a number of years. Finally, here, just this year, I found 2 young fellas out of Santa Maria and Cascadero area that could actually do the work. And they were excited to do it, honored to do it. The pattern maker was Jeff Tolan, and I'd worked with him in Santa Margarita on the Pacific Coast Railroad there. And the other one was Ernest Blakely. He has a backyard foundry. So between the two of them, they produced a pattern, and it took about 4 tries to actually get the plate to cast properly. But the end result is beautiful. like every project here at Roaring Camp, it's not just me. It always is, always will be a team effort. No one person can do it all, nor do you want to. So that being said, Tom came in on the project. I told him about the plate, and he inscribed on the back.
I inscribed on the back a dedication to Mrs. Clark. I inscribed property of Roaring Camp. And I also inscribed stolen from locomotive number 1. So that if some evil person comes along and takes this plate, there's no way he can sell it.
So after that, we got it inscribed. We ran the plate down to Roaring Camp. The blacksmith hut down there has a really nice old press. And we took some 2x4s and a piece of bar stock. And we were able to press, not roll, but press a radius in that plate to fit the diameter of the smoke box. Then we took it, painted it with a high temperature black paint, and brought the lettering back out. I left some of the old paint on there just to give it that patina and to say it's not perfect. No plate ever was ever casted perfect for any locomotive ever built. And so today is the day that we decided to literally install it on the locomotive. That started with looking at some old photographs to determine where the original plate was, looking at the original boiler where you can still see the old rivets or studs or whatever it was that was in there. And we kind of determined that's where the plate would live. Came here, kind of measured it out, set it up there, drilled 4 holes, and riveted in place. Bolted it and riveted in place. In that time it took to get these plates made, Mrs. Clark passed away. But I'd promised her this promise, and so I am fulfilling that promise. It's a promise kept. The Dixiana now has a builder's plate from the original Lima drawings that we have. And from this day on forward, people could look at it and say, yeah, it's a Lima locomotive number 2593, built 1912.
It's not every day you get to see something behind the scenes like that. Special thanks to Phil and Tom for having us out to witness the event. I can say for certain that from now on, every time I see the Dixiana up at Roaring Camp, I'll notice the builder's plate and I will remember how it got there. It's my understanding that Roaring Camp is open right now with very strict social distancing in place. If you've been wanting to get out for a ride through the Redwoods, it's absolutely the best place I know of to do that. As a matter of fact, no matter where you live, I encourage you to check with your local heritage railroads to see if they're open. I know for sure that they could use your support, especially having been closed for the past couple of months. I got a bunch of photos from my friend Nick. You know him as Nice Hands Nick from the channel here. What you might not know is that he's actually a very talented modeler too. The photos he sent me were of his first N-scale project that he's worked on in 3 years. Take a look. It's a Montana Rail Link GP40. He started with a decorated model of some other line, and so he had to strip the paint with alcohol. Then he added a bunch of detail parts, including some wire grabs and a speed recorder on the truck and an uncoupling lever. Then he painted it and added DCC and sound. I think it turned out pretty good. On our Shelter in Place live program a couple weeks ago, I asked the viewers to send good train catches that they were able to get photos of, and let me tell you, they did not disappoint. This first shot came from a guy named Christian who caught this train on June 7th in a place called Berea, Ohio. It has NS 4002 and NS 8099 headed east toward Baltimore. I also received these photos of a BNSF stack train taken on Friday, June 12th. These came from Al Hovey in New Mexico. Al has a program for youth in model railroading, and one of the older members named Chris P. took these photos out on the Gallup subdivision. I think that Canadian Pacific SD70 ACU 7014 stole the show on this power consist. I also received some photos from Rowan K. in Australia. In early June, he went up to the northwest coast and sent some interesting photos of a small steamer that he referred to as CCS-25, which is planned to return to steam on the Don River Railway in the future. So if you have something you'd like to share, you're welcome to send it to me at podcast@tsgmultimedia.com. All I ask is that you only send your own photos and tell me what it is, when, and where it was taken. I won't be able to share all the photos I get, but I'd love to share your best catches if you want to share them here. And now for this month's YouTube program schedule. Saturday, July 11th, it's the Loram Rail Grinder Chase. On Saturday the 18th, I'm inviting you to see an example of one of our TSG Train Crew virtual hangouts. It's called Ask a Railroader. And in this session, we had 2 railroaders on hand to answer questions from Patreon supporters. On Sunday the 19th at 4 p.m. Pacific, we're going live once again with our special Shelter-in-Place webcast. On this episode, I'll give viewers a mid-month update, and who knows what else. After all, it's live. On the 25th, Model Railroading 101 returns with a special look at an invitation-only operating weekend that has been put on annually for many years near Sonora, California. It's called Op to Drop. This program features 2 layouts that have both been on the channel as layout tours, John Zock's Sierra and Steve Hayes' Western Pacific layout. John uses a form of timetable and train order operations, and Steve's is a great example of Centralized Traffic Control, or CTC. So before I go, I want to invite you to become a member of the TSG Train Crew on Patreon. If you can help out with $2 a month or more, head over to patreon.com/TSG Multimedia. As part of the Train Crew, you can feel great about helping me get the content you enjoy on the channel for the world to see. It'll also help me get the ads off the channel once and for all. And for any interested companies out there, please contact me at podcast@tsgmultimedia.com if you would like to get your company name or your products in front of the best audience on YouTube. So that's it. As always, I thank you for your continued support, and I'll see you next time.